All right, welcome everyone. My name is Karen Johnson. I'm with the Gates Foundation, and I'm really excited to be introducing this amazing panel that we have with us today. As part of our work at the Gates Foundation, we are really struggling with the problem that it's really hard to understand what edtech products work best for which students in which circumstances. That information just isn't out there. And so as we put together some of our strategy of what we wanted to fund, we came to this concept of the Learning Assembly, where this group of really great, diverse organizations are doing rapid cycle evaluations. They are basically taking products with and introducing them with schools and doing some product evaluations that are beneficial both for the schools as well as the edtech developers themselves. And they've really done some unique things by piloting products in a way that gives really actionable insights to both educators and edtech developers. So I'm really looking forward to today's discussion. Want to have Phyllis take it from here.
Thanks, Karen. Thanks so much. And thanks, everyone, for being here. We were concerned about competing against Carol Dweck. No, I'm just kidding. It's like, we can all just go over there. No, I'm just teasing. I'm teasing. So my name is Phyllis Lockett. I'm the CEO of Leap Innovations. We're an education nonprofit in Chicago that was started because, actually, the idea came from being at a GSV conference 4 years ago because there is just this big disconnect between all the innovation that's happening kind of in the tech world and what educators are doing practically in the classroom. And I wanted to figure out how we can make sure that our kids and our schools are getting access to these kind of innovations to help personalize and advance learning for every student. And so the Gates Foundation has been core to our effort, first of all, getting Leap started, and secondly, by helping a number of other networks across the country, all of us assemble, called the Learning Assembly, advance this work. And so we're super excited to have this great panel of ours today. And before I do, I also want to mention the Learning Assembly members, that some of you guys are in the room. So the folks include New York City iZone, Citizen Schools out of Boston, but they're national, LearnLaunch out of Boston, the Highlander Institute in Rhode Island, the Silicon Valley Education Foundation, Digital Promise and their work specifically in the Pittsburgh area, as well as Leap Innovation. So all of us are comprised to help advance this work and really put teachers and educators in the middle of the decision-making process of how do we think about innovating, how do we bridge the gap between what innovators are creating and developing so they're solving more closely to the needs of educators and students, and providing that kind of feedback. Feedback not only to edtech companies so we can make sure that they're developing more robust solutions, but also to educators and principals and districts so they're making really smart decisions about what types of technology products to advance. So with that, I am thrilled to introduce our panel. We have Scott Frauenheim immediately to my right. And you know, Scott is a rock star principal in Chicago that we have been working with since the beginning of Leap, and has been part of our pilot efforts as well as our whole school change efforts around personalized learning. We also have Eileen Rudden, who was a former Chicago person who I'm kind of upset that she left and went to Boston. But she is the board chair of the LearnLaunch Institute and co-founder of LearnLaunch. And they're doing great things, which she'll be telling you a lot about. We have Amy Hoffmaster, who is the Deputy Director of Program Design for Citizen Schools. Again, another Learning Assembly member. And then Nick Gaehde, who we're so happy that you're here, because Nick is the CEO of Lexia and has been a core partner with Leap and LearnLaunch in our pilot networks. And so from an edtech leader perspective, he's got a lot to share as well. So I'm going to start with an opening question to all of you. So as an edtech company, school leader, Learning Assembly member organization, please describe the piloting process from your vantage point and how it's been valuable to your organization. Scott, you want to start?
Sure. Yeah, so at CICS West Belden, we're on the west side of Chicago, a charter school with about 500 students, part of distinctive schools, and we had a vision for transforming personalized learning, but we felt so overwhelmed by all of the different approaches and didn't really have an entry point in our mind of where we wanted to start or where we needed to start. The piloting process has been super beneficial to us as a school, working alongside Leap Innovations through their pilot network to really vet and find really, really strong partnerships aligned to specific needs from our building. I feel like in the past, when we started some of this work in 2012, 2013, we were bringing so many different programs into our building and not really truly defining the why. And we wanted to make sure that we weren't just innovating to innovate with products that really didn't meet our needs. It's been really, really cool to see all of the programs that we had been able to bring in through the pilot process and how our staff has really bought into those and being supported by Leap and the professional development that's been offered. When we first started personalized learning and moving in that direction, I tell this story a lot, but I think we were averaging like 15 to 20 calls a month of like, hey, can you jump on this webinar with us? Or hey, we want to do a mini pilot in your school. We heard you're doing some really cool things. And we just started to get more and more overwhelmed. And we realized that we weren't really truly identifying our needs. And so the piloting process has helped us to evolve through that and find really strong partnerships.
I'm Eileen Rudden from LearnLaunch. And being part of the Learning Assembly has been really terrific for LearnLaunch. We are sort of a two-headed beast in that we support entrepreneurs who, many of them former teachers, who actually are creating innovations, but we also are supporting educators in our New England regional area. And what the Learning Assembly allows us to do is actually work with the Boston Public Schools. We're a fantastic opportunity to partner with them to help answer these questions that Karen mentioned at the beginning. You know, which personalized learning solutions work for which students and where? Because I think we all know our mission is to drive innovation to transform learning, but unless educators have some sense of what works for whom, you know, most educators would ask for evidence base, and in a whole new area like this, there is not an evidence base yet, and so creating that evidence base, I think, is extremely important to actually driving innovation and transforming learning.
Wonderful. So at Citizen Schools, we work with public middle schools with high needs and offer an expanded day through partnerships. And we plan those every year with our principals. And we come up with basically a strategy for academic support that will lead to the outcomes that they're most interested for their students around math or ELA. And several years ago, we realized we were getting more and more requests to kind of move away from the traditional paper-based types of lesson plans that we had been using in the curricula that we were using to more digital products that schools were involving in their day or interested in including in their curriculum. And we didn't have a good answer at that point about what products would be a good fit for our model. And so we started the work then and really have ramped that up to better understand for our teaching fellows who are brand new educators, they're AmeriCorps members, teaching in the afternoons in both a project-based learning environment and in academic support. What are the products that are going to be best for them to use and be able to understand the data that they get back out in order to support their students best? And so having a structured and disciplined way to really learn from that over time has been crucial, and participation in the Learning Assembly and kind of getting input and understanding from a lot of people who are doing this work in other areas of the education sector has really helped us to move faster through that.
That's great.
So for those of you who don't know Lexia, we've been helping students master their foundational reading skills for over 32 years, and we're in about 19,500 schools across the country. We've now been part of the Learning Assembly, both working with LEAP in Chicago and working with LearnLaunch in Boston. And it's not that dissimilar to what this conference is like. If you think about speed dating and you have 15 minutes to meet someone and forge a connection, that's really where the process starts. But what the Learning Assembly has been able to do is really drive commitment from schools, both leadership and in the classroom, to make sure that before they invest the time and energy in piloting a program, that there are set expectations on all sides. And so we're working in a partnership right from the beginning where there's a common understanding of what the goals are and what the objectives are, and that just sets up so much for success.
Great, and we're so thankful. We were just in the early stages of even thinking about LEAP and our process. The notion that edtech companies would, want to get that kind of exposure. They need to get sales, obviously. You need to get access and sales, key. But part of the linchpin for us was being able to measure the data, measuring the impact on student achievement, and how these different things work was really the linchpin. And so talk to us, I just want to get all your perspectives, because some edtech companies initially when we first started, they were like, we're not doing that. Like, why should we do that? We've got our own mechanism and way. Why should we be part of this? So can you share just from your perspectives, because I don't know how many edtech companies you've got in the audience. How many do we have, by the way? Raise your hands. With you. Of why, why it's so important that the tech sector get involved in piloting in this way with schools.
I think the partnerships that we've had that have been most successful have been a really strong partnership between product and vendor and teacher. And having teachers really being able to inform change and inform the approaches that the companies are taking in our schools. The people that have been open to feedback have been the partnerships that that have lasted in our school, just because we feel like that constant support is there and people are listening to us. Whether it be a teacher dashboard that's not user friendly, or specific content that we think that we might want added. Those people that are listening to us, we want to stay and work with them because we feel like we're being heard and we feel like we're being supported for the good of kids. I also think that the companies that we've worked with, like just based on their feedback from the pilot network, and talking to ST Math almost weekly this year, and Lexia, just like constantly hearing us about what the supports are needed in our school, that it's really hopefully helped them, because there's like this teacher sharing, with people that never really are in classrooms or working with kids every single day.
Any others? You don't have to go in order in line, but any other comments?
I think for us it was important to acknowledge that the products that we were working with already had, to your point, their own kind of systems for feedback and those loops, and the kind of student interviews that they did or teacher interviews that they did. But we were able to bring a profile of teacher that they might not have had access to before. So what does this look like to use a product in after school or in support of a school day teacher's goals? And that's opening up, in some ways, a new market or a new use case for them. And so it has been interesting to kind of bring that to the mix.
Yeah.
And as an ed tech company, we think about pilots, and we've piloted for many, many years in schools. And I think for us, there's always a hesitancy to pilot, but not for the reasons you might think. It's usually because it's so easy for a school to say, sure, I'll try it. And when that happens, there just isn't enough skin in the game to make sure that everybody is putting the effort into the program to make sure that it's supported with fidelity. And as a result of the structure from LEAP and LearnLaunch, that rigor is there. And so again, everybody goes into it with eyes wide open, with a real commitment to making it work. Because of that, it's a really positive experience with great outcomes.
No, that's great. And one of the things we wanted to underscore as well is, in a lot of cases, this kind of came out some early research that, the edtech educators aren't supportive of some edtech products because they don't like them or they didn't work. Well, sometimes that's tied to the level of fidelity around implementation. And not having a really strong, sense or hypothesis of what you're trying to do or solve, or how is this getting incorporated in your classroom experience. So all of those things are like really critical, as I think we've all been kind of evolving in this. And so Scott, can you talk a little bit about that, because CICS West Belden is quickly become a national exemplar. We were fortunate to have Alan Odden from the Gates Foundation fly in personally last year. I took him to West Belden, and he said, this was one of my most happiest days in education because of the work that Scott is doing. And just, can you talk about how the piloting processes kind of help advance your trajectory?
Sure, yeah. Thanks for the kind words. With all of your support, we've been able to make huge strides in the past 2 years. We've been part of the pilot network with LEAP, and then we've also been part of the Next Generation Learning Challenges Breakthrough Schools process. And so awarded financial support to make transformational change in our building. Again, I mentioned this earlier, but everything felt so big picture to us. And so we believed in this shift, and we knew that we wanted to provide kids a 21st century learning experience, and we wanted to move from a traditional educational approach. And so where to start was really overwhelming. And so, we focused on student agency, we focused on personalized learning plans, we talked about tech and going one-to-one, but really needed to tie things back together. And so through the support of LEAP and the pilot network, really defining the purpose for why we wanted to change. And so we came up with design anchors alongside of our staff. And so some of our design anchors were student engagement, stagnation of growth, low student engagement, stagnation of growth, and one positive design anchor was teacher readiness. And so really starting with culture first and having teachers buy into the process through the piloting experience. Making so much change in our building, we knew that we needed really strong partners and we needed really trusted solutions that we needed to help us make this change with. And so partnering with Lexia and ST Math from like an understanding of, we knew that we needed an early literacy blended program that was really going to be something that we can trust. We wanted to reduce the teacher to student ratio during all core reading instructional time. And so being able to trust a product and a program that's going to give us really valuable data that's specifically aligned to our curricular approaches and not feeling so disjointed. And so, also remembering that the products were going to support and enhance us making these changes. And so we sat around the table and talked about our competency-based approaches and thinking about formative assessment and constantly going back to some of these programs being able to support and enhance what we're talking about at the table and what we're doing with our teachers. And so making sure that the products do not feel like an add-on and really are infused into the vision of what your design anchors are, why are you making change for kids, and then how are the products or the programs going to support the overall vision without teachers feeling like 16 different things are being asked of them in the transformational process.
Well, our work with the Boston Public Schools really stemmed out of, we believe that there were a lot of innovative teachers that were trying products individually, but that the next step was going to be actual, sort of more full school or certainly class use of the technology to get better student outcomes. And so our pilot process was geared around, competition for 6 to 8 committed teachers with a supportive principal to become part of the process. And interestingly enough, 4 of our 6 schools actually came through the principals, and 2 of the schools actually came through the Teach Plus network that basically found groups of 6 to 8 teachers. In one case, it was in a very difficult school which had a lot of rotating principals, and the teachers were taking leadership. And so this then provided them the structure in our urban setting, where we haven't been part of the NGLC program or other full school redesign programs, but gave these innovative school leaders and teachers the opportunity to deploy the technology to meet very specific English language arts goals that they set.
Our teachers responded to us and said, through this process, their reflection was like, wow, we've never been part of these conversations before. You're asking us to help design the why and define the why and really meet with these programs. And so through the pilot network process, lots of professional development on doing all of these things to find out what your solution should or need to be. But having teachers at the table, I think, was the biggest win and success for us from day one. And so teachers' reflection of well, usually the director or principal usually just tells us what our why is and why we need to change, and then we go in and we make the change or find the solution. But having teachers listen to the pitches from different vendors and programs to really ask targeted classroom directed questions was really powerful for us in helping teachers to help us make the decisions.
That's great. Amy, can you talk a little bit more about your piloting process and how you guys are serving as a bridge between educators and innovators?
Sure. So in some of our pilots, we're working in 9 of our 30-plus citizen schools this year. And in some of those spots, principals or groups of teachers had particular products that they were either thinking about using or were using in their classrooms. And we kind of added capacity to those existing implementations by using them in the after-school time. And in some cases, there was a vision for more of a design challenge or a particular problem without that next answer of like, so what should we use to help with that in terms of a digital tool? And in those cases, we did come in and support a little bit more in the identification of some of the resources that we were both interested in working with, had some early results that were interesting, and seemed to fit within the capacity that we thought we had to implement in our schools. The ways that we've kind of looked at those products have been through the teacher lens, lots of feedback and conversations, but also through the lenses of our campus directors, who are program leaders and managers of our teaching fellows, kind of bubbling up that feedback at a larger level and encouraging their teaching fellows to structure that feedback in a way that is proactive and meaningful. And so we've done that. We've done student interviews, and really the kind of third most important prong is to actually look at our interim assessment data results together and see what the student growth really shows us. So both the more anecdotal feedback that we're getting all through the year, and then that really important piece of actually seeing, does the data that we're seeing from our product, the progress in STMath or quiz scores in a particular product, really match up to the interim assessment results that we know we need to get in order to use that long term.
Yeah, that's great. So Nick, Lexia is a mature company. You said over 30 years. So what value of this was really to you, right? I mean, can you share, like, were there learnings that you got out of, participating in the pilot network?
Yeah, absolutely. We have been at this a very long time, and we know that our programs work and deliver really significant student outcomes. We've been published in multiple peer-reviewed journals and have a long history of that kind of research. But the wild card is always what happens to the program when it enters the school. How is it going to be used? How is it going to be supported? How are teachers and administrators going to interact with the data? And that's the kind of learning that we got out of this close partnership. I think we were pushed hard in terms of really making it clear what kind of data teachers needed to pay attention to. I think we learned about the effectiveness of different implementation models, whether it's rotation model or other models. And so that kind of focus, not just on the product, but on the product in the real world and the interaction between teachers, administrators, and students is just incredibly valuable for us. And it's a constant process of refinement and improvement. And so that's, I think, one of the reasons why we continue to want to be part of the program.
That's awesome, and we are so deeply grateful for your partnership. And I do want to note that in our first year of the pilot network, Lexia's performance was fantastic. It was just a phenomenal result. I think every school that piloted you guys, I think, ended up adopting Lexia. Yeah. So it's just been a great partnership and a great exposure point for our kids to get access to innovation. So I just want to thank you personally for just jumping in and getting involved.
Thank you. And it's always, we can always talk about how effective our programs are, but when somebody like LEAP talks about it, it's just so much more powerful.
That's great. And Eileen, so what's fascinating about LearnLaunch is that you're an investor, right? And so you were investing in entrepreneurs and innovation, and you saw a value, right, as an investor to shift and expand your model to do these kinds of pilots and working more closely and directly with schools and educators. Can you kind of explain that trajectory in that process?
Sure. So we are our mission. We are trying to drive innovation to transform learning, and we actually are a 501c3. And an accelerator. And the reason that we're both is that we saw, and this is going to sound a little economically wonky, but that really there needed to be solutions that met the need of educators, sort of improved supply, and that there also needed to be improved demand. Without the demand for these solutions, it wasn't going to happen. And so, sort of part of our team is actively engaged in the investment and the mentoring and the cultivation of new solutions. Some of them include quill.org, they're here, and PlayPosit is here, and a number of others that have gone through our program. But then there are a number of us, I have been an educator in Chicago Public Schools as well as a leader in the software business for many years. Have it is my passion then to work with the educators to see the possibility. And I know when I first went into the education world, and everybody was talking about evidence-based this and evidence-based that, and I came from the tech world, which was, how do you get evidence until you create it? And so it was clear to me that this is just a huge gap, that for the educators, it has to be rooted in research, and there has to be evidence. And so what I could see, it's all well and good and I'm happy to invest and mentor these, the new startups, but that it's equally important to create an evidence base for educators. It's equally important to support educators on their journey to adopt these solutions, because it isn't about technology. And I've never seen, in my 30 years in high tech, never saw anybody adopt software for the software because it's cool. They do it, for outcomes, which in this case is, our most precious next generation. So and now I'm a grandparent, so I can say I have an even greater stake than just my own kids, my grandkids and all of our kids. So that's how we wind up being active in both sides, because I think that it isn't, there's going to be innovators and there's going to be people using the innovations, and we need to connect them.
Yeah. So I guess one of the things, another amazing thing LearnLaunch is doing is it hosts this major conference every year where you're getting, serious investors from, the Eastern Corridor, probably all over, to come and learn and get exposure around edtech innovation and, connection to educators, et cetera. It's fascinating in terms of the degree to which investors, you look at investors who invest in edtechs or, at the early stage level, mid-stage level, why they should care about these kind of outcomes. Because, I think, again, I've had so many conversations with the tech companies who are like, I got to get sales. Well, and so how do we shift that, right? So that the education sector is demanding, results and outcomes around this and getting folks on the same page. What's your perspective? Yeah.
Well, investors are looking to see that the solution providers work. And, investors know it's not about technology. It's not about a shiny new thing. People get overwhelmed with shiny new things. It's about what actually creates results, in this case, student learning. So I would say, and Deb Quazzo would say say the same thing, and she always talks about return on education, which is that really the solutions that provide actual results for educators and for students are the ones that are going to be successful. And investors are looking for the ones that are going to be successful. They're not looking for something that won't be successful. Usually their bigger questions are around, do you have a route to market? Do you know how to sell this? And the challenges of the education marketplace, because a lot of it's even more seasonal than consumer tech.
Right.
Because most of the adoptions are happening in the September, October timeframe.
So everyone maybe being on the same page around communicating these kind of outcomes and results could help spur that adoption, perhaps, right? So I think it's just the opportunity, right, to get everyone on the same page around this, investors, edtech companies, and the education sector, all kind of on the same page on this. I think is really critical in terms of moving the kind of innovation that we want to pretty rapidly. Scott, before I open up for questions, Scott, I just wanted to just ask you, for the educators that are here today, who don't have piloting organizations in their cities, based on your experiences of innovating, what advice would you give them?
Yeah, so I've talked to a few different principals that are like, we don't have a LEAP, or we don't have a pilot network, or we don't have a LearnLaunch. Like, what do we do, and how do we get started? And so some of the feedback that I've given or that I've heard is really getting teachers and leaders out of their schools to go and identify or have programs identify for them who's doing the work or who's using the product at specific schools in their vicinity. Really going out and getting inspired by the different work that is happening and really finding out why those schools or those organizations adopted some of the programs. And so also really thinking about like mini pilots before the pilot. And so really thinking about like a small group of people that would not affect your overall staff or your overall overall vision of where you were headed in a school year. And so we did this in a few different ways, but picking some of our best teachers or some of our teacher leaders from the classroom and asking them and tapping them on the shoulder to try one or two things aligned to a specific need in the building before it affected a team or affected 6 months of time from a teacher's perspective. And so before the pilot, mini pilot, but those mini pilots really helped to inform like, oh, I'm the teacher leader that's going to go and lead this with my team, so let me figure out how to do it first and work out all the kinks and work out all the different things that need to be worked out before bringing it back to the larger group of teachers. And so I think going out, being inspired, and then learning as much upfront as you can before taking an entire staff through an implementation without the true knowledge. And one thing that the pilot network really helped us to do, and me as a new young school leader, is that accountability piece. And so Nick mentioned like we were pushed really hard. I remember getting emails from Chris being like, Scott, I noticed that you haven't logged into Lexia in 3 days, like as the school director. And so being held accountable to, like, I know it's a buzzword and we all say it, but like fidelity of implementation, and like a school leader has to believe in the product or has to believe in the problem that the product's solving alongside the teachers, and having the teachers alongside the school leader from day one of identifying the problem and then identifying the solution. And then helping to take it to scale, to the point now where I've said this, like I feel like the teachers are driving the bus and I'm like chasing behind them because they're so invested and they feel like they've been so a part of it and they've helped to identify it.
Great advice.
Hopefully we didn't push too hard.
No.
I love that. That's so great. That's so great. So I'd love to open it for questions. Yes.
Just one about continuity. Do you each have your own basis for identifying success, or is there some commonality between you when you say a program is successful, or it's measuring needs? What's your rubric, or how do you establish that criteria?
So I'll take a stab at that for Leap. So we've got a pretty extensive process. It's a 18-month program, 6-month professional development training with the principal and the core set of teachers. They're going to be piloting, going through a process together in a collaborative fashion. And then a year long of analysis, honestly, of implementation and analysis. At this point, we are anchoring on a map, fall map, and we are really triangulating because we're actually piloting multiple products in various schools, across the city. And so we're doing a mid-year and we're doing end of year propensity analysis with the control group. We get CPS data, and so we are inherently assessing what of the solutions and approaches are really driving student achievement from a growth standpoint. So that's how we're approaching it.
Right. And I think at the end of the day, we're all looking at it the same way. What's the impact on student outcomes?
Right.
And we can talk about how we measure student outcomes,
thanks.
but I think it's pretty easy to get aligned and have a common framework to say this is how we're going to measure student outcomes. And if you see that, then everything else follows. And for us as a for-profit company, yes, you may say we are focused on sales and continuing to drive market penetration, but at the end of the day, it's student outcomes, and that's what we talk about. If we can deliver student outcomes, everything else takes care of itself.
We had we continue to have a little bit more of a challenge on this front, in that we feel like we have a lot of confidence in our measurements around this teacher satisfaction and what they're seeing with students, and we've had very strong metrics around capturing information from the teachers, including down to net promoter scores, and we get very clear results from that. What they are happy with, that includes their views about student performance. However, we are in a district that doesn't have a standard formative assessment. We are in a district in which for the first time, they only use PARCC for the first time, and so there's not sort of an understanding of using that national summative test as a benchmark. And we are in a district in which it is extremely costly to get student data, and so we're on an ongoing journey in terms of how to be able to do real product efficacy that's based on those clear data. We will have the data, from the products, and sort of yours is well studied, you know, although the teachers will also say, I'm comparing it on my own to Dibbles, and I'm comparing it on my own to Fontainebleau, and I'm comparing it on my own to any number of other metrics that are out there. So, you know, if you are in districts, you know, perhaps you're lucky enough where there is a standard, you know, formative assessment, or there's confidence in your end of year tests, it might be easier. But then there is such rich data coming from the products, and the teachers, how they're able to use that data goes well beyond, they're all well trained in data-driven instruction, but they say that now I can understand whether it's the difference between long E and short E, and I can understand whether, you know, just at a level of detail that you never get from a formative. So it's a challenge, but also there's a lot more there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I share your kind of sentiment there about just the usefulness of the real-time data being a big win. Citizen Schools is piloting in several districts, all different versions of the challenge that you talked about, and access to data. We have data sharing agreements with all of our schools, but what that actually looks like is different from place to place, and the timing of that is different. And so it is that combination of the satisfaction and survey, student observations, and student feedback. And then just the practices, like this is how I'm using the product data in combination with my DIBBLES or my regular formative assessment. That's where we're really finding the meaning. In addition to that, like end of the day, did we get the longer term outcomes that we were looking at?
Because the practice changes are significant.
Yes, they are. They are great. Yes.
See, I've developed a tablet with 10,000 problems and solutions for STEM subjects. And so this doesn't require the internet. And so how do I go about start participating in a pilot program to see its effectiveness?
Yeah.
You guys want to talk? I can. So LEAP, we have an annual process. Typically starts in the fall. So what happens is, I'll take you through this year. So in February of this year, we launched our cohort of schools that are starting their semester-long professional development training. And we have 21 schools now that are going to be for piloting for next school year. What happens is at the end of May, during that process, we are going to the marketplace to say, you know, solution companies, do you have solutions? We're dealing right now with K-8 literacy and math. If you have solutions that address these specific issues, apply to LEAP. And we have this whole evaluation process behind the scenes. By the time the school teams we have match day, the speed dating thing that Nick referred to, they know what they need, and they've got a good window and visibility in terms of, you know, exactly what they're trying to solve in their classrooms. And then we invite companies who pass our curation metrics into match day. And you get picked. You get picked or you don't get picked. But because it really is the school team's decision in terms of what they bring in. And then it's the pilot process for the year. So that's how it works. But that's our process. But everyone's different. Yeah.
So I should pitch this product to you and then go.
Don't pitch to me. I'm the wrong person to pitch to. I would say if you're interested, if you have a K-8 math or literacy, you should apply when we open the window for applications. And then that's how you come in.
I have to wait till next year?
Yeah, sorry, you just missed our window. We're going to have our match day at the end of end of May. We had over 50 companies apply, so it's kind of cool. So next season, but these guys may have a sooner window.
And I would say, like, if you haven't had a chance yet to test with a group of teachers, a grade level in the subject that you're most interested in, having those early stories and those early proof points will be really important when you're approaching a broader pilot group. And so we'll start there if you haven't yet. Yeah.
So I have the prototype right in my hands, and so it's all ready. And so I need to, like you're saying, do a pre-pilot or something.
Yeah. Something really low risk where you can involve a few teachers who are interested to your
Right.
point, and looking for something new,
Right.
And get feedback and be really open to that feedback in that first round.
That's right. That's right. Because when, in our case, when we're scaling it up to thousands of students, it's not, we don't want to be experimenting on students. We want to have some track record already where we're working with the.
So you can do this
Great point.
pre-piloting in California and Cupertino.
Yeah, we can talk offline because one of our partners is actually doing some early stage piloting for that kind of level of feedback that may be perfect actually for you. So let's talk after.
That's true.
Okay, do you have the question? Yes.
So I'm currently building a school for children with 4 different languages simultaneously.
Can you start that again? Because
Sorry.
I can hear you.
I'm currently at Penn in the Education Entrepreneurship Program, and I'm building a school that has a project-based curriculum that's implemented in 4 different languages simultaneously. So the idea, I'll be piloting in September, and I'm actually piloting in Newark, New Jersey. I'm returning home to where I'm from, and we don't have a LEAP or a pilot program of any kind whatsoever. So because the research is fairly new and innovative, I'm pre-piloting, but I'm doing it inside of a school because I don't have one established. And you guys have already had your school established and you kind of pulled out a small portion of it in order to pilot. What would be your advice or any wisdom around piloting something that has to be, because language acquisition, you have to do it pretty much all the time, inside of another venue rather than, because I'm thinking about cost structure. So having a place of my own might be way more expensive than just kind of doing it inside of someone else. What would be your advice around that?
I think like finding a subgroup of students that would meet the demographics of students that you were serving and the languages that you would want to be serving at your whole scale to really identify how the programs meet the needs of those specific learners as much as possible. It's tough when you don't have the group of students, but also thinking about like, I don't know when your enrollment window opens, but anything that you can do over the summer or prior to students starting full scale that you can get students in your building and think about funding structures to bring in either a summer program or an anytime anywhere learning program that you have kids trying at home, so you're at least watching the data of the specific learners coming in to identify some of the decisions that you need to make. And we've done that in small pockets with some of our innovations at our schools, but I don't know.
You're probably already thinking a lot about this, but I think it can be tempting to say, like, I'm testing this idea, so I want to like try it as is, and it's a bit of an experiment. But thinking about how you will have those educators support each other early on, and kind of baking that into your design. Not to say like it's an experiment, so I would want to see what this looks like to drop it in somewhere, but actually to build your training and support systems. Knowing that in this first year they might be different than they would eventually be from the design that you'll have is something I would recommend. We learned a lot about that this year, and those conversations, not only helping the educators help each other, but really surface the needs that we should be thinking more about as the folks who are supporting them.
And finding a really strong partner that you can trust and have a relationship with to help you build this out, and people that want to have a stake in that. We've had many different programs, not to be named in this conversation, but just kind of overpromised and underserved, and we've had to abandon when we didn't really want to abandon, but knew that we needed to because we didn't want it to affect student growth or teacher burnout or frustration. And so really trusting and finding a partner that's willing to help you do it alongside of you would be powerful.
Thank you. Any other questions?
I've seen really strong products fail within some of our schools, given like a lack of strong professional development that goes along with those products. When you're analyzing a new product, what do you look for in terms of the professional development provided by that product for the district or school?
So I know that funding is really tough in like all of our professional development budgets and all of that from a school perspective, but having that strong partnership of in-person, face-to-face teacher support is so powerful. Having teacher leaders being able to lead the work on their own when that product support leaves is really powerful. And so having either mentor teachers or instructional coaches that can support the development of teachers ongoing with the support of a program. But I think the heavy lift up front of like face-to-face alongside arm in arm, a really strong partner in your building is so important for fidelity of implementation from what we've learned in the past 2 years, to the point where like I reflect back on some of the programs that we've either piloted or implemented, and the ones that are most successful are the ones that have had the strongest partnership of like the person. And I think that person from like an ed tech perspective is so important, where like some of our programs were like, oh my gosh, we're dreading getting on this webinar because it's going to be torture and it's going to be 45 minutes and they don't know what our practice looks like, and it's so hard to understand, their perspective versus our perspective when they're 6 states away or across the country. And so the school leadership really taking on the heavy lift after the in-person support from a product.
Yeah, and I agree that partnership from the very beginning of the process is so important. And as much as we rely on technology and being able to do things from a distance, I think establishing that relationship at the beginning is critical. At the same time, we think about blended learning not just for the students, but also for teachers and administrators. So as much as there may be a great partnership and in-person support, what we always see is a new teacher coming in, or somebody missed something, or somebody wants to review something. So having material that is well constructed, that can be viewed and used anytime, anywhere, in addition to that in-person support, I think creates a much stronger web.
And some of this also may have to do with how many things you're trying to do at once. Because in our setting, really these teachers were, the major approach was really the English language arts. And we had very specific professional development provided by Meg's mom, provided by Meg in the back of the room. But really, the work with our vendor partners like Lexia was very interesting. The teachers like you guys had said, well, we typically do the data training 6 to 8 weeks after. And one of the learnings that we had is the teacher said, gee, we really needed that data training earlier because we love the data. And we want to use the data and it informs our instruction. And actually, we could have done that faster. So, I mean, the professional development is a really key part of it. But I think we were all still learning as a part of our project.
I think from some of our last year's implementations to this year, I learned to ask really specific kind of annoying questions about the specific of what that education consultant or training will do. So they'll have some sort of menu of what the training is, and then I asked 75 follow-up questions about, so when you say you go over frequently asked questions, like what are those questions? And like, how do you do that? Because I think product teams have done a lot of work to make sure that their consultants and trainers are familiar with your context, but they can't be perfect fits for everybody. And so I think there's a role for leaders to shape those trainings and be proactive and not wait for them to flop to say like, oh, their training stinks, right? Like that's not that helpful either. And I think there's an important role for us to speak up proactively about what we think will be needed in order to make that training effective in our particular settings.
Yeah, and then the commitments actually from the educators to use according to the recommended dosage when that was a criteria, because some of the products didn't have a dosage and they were kind of easier to absorb, but Lexia and some of the others that we worked with did have that, and there needs to be a professional development component around that. And certainly the teachers couldn't have had 5 different people saying you need to have the dosage. It was hard enough for them to, and actually the teachers would say this, I had to commit 3 hours of my week. That's a lot of instructional time. And just the letting go, they describe a letting go of what that meant. And they found it actually gave them something, but just how to make that transition in practice is just huge and requires support.
Yeah, the development outside of just the product data and what we're getting from it, we saw more development needed on like the teacher instructional planning around the product and how they were using the data to drive their instruction. And so making alignment to their curricular approaches or their curriculum blocks of what they were teaching and how the product or program was going to support that was like the biggest lift of development for our teachers in making some of these shifts.
Great. I think we have time for one more question. Yes.
I'm just curious to what extent you involve the students in assessing the kinds of companies that you want to bring into the school as a learning opportunity for them to analyze that kind of
This was kind of relatively easy for us because much to our surprise, close to 70% wanted to do pre-K through grade 3. And we were just completely surprised. We thought, middle school. We didn't know when we went out into, and I mean, it caused all kinds of issues because the standardized testing doesn't start until grade 3. I mean, it caused us all kinds of challenges. But asking the kids to choose between Lexia and Imagine Learning or whatever else, Headsprout, not relevant really at that level.
You want to talk?
Yes.
And I can tell you about what.
So through the pilot network, LEAP has done student surveys, and so they collect student feedback to help the schools make informed decisions, but then also to give data back to the products and to the vendors. And so that's been really powerful to see some of the student responses and what they're thinking. We are being really intentional about like a sustainability plan, a program implementation, and so we're seeing like, okay, K, 1, 2, 3, loving Lexia engagement really high. 4 or 5, it's like, oh, we're still on Lexia. We trust it because we know that that's a program we want kids to be on, but how are we supplementing some supports for like re-engagement of the products and the programs that we're using? Same thing in math, like ST Math, kids are loving it, they're engaged, but it's like pretty soon they're gonna see burnout. And so we've seen like burnout and then like revival. So like IXL was like major burnout for our kids last year. They were like, Mr. Frauenheim, we can't do IXL 1 more minute, but like now it's making a comeback and the kids love it. And so finding like the waves of engagement I think is really important just to keep kids excited about what the program provides them, but then also having them, again, student ownership and agency, but having them take more ownership or control of what they're learning and what the program's supporting them learning. So we're creating personalized learning plans right now, and there's a complete alignment to the programs that kids are using so that they're tracking their own progress. They're setting daily actionable goals for themselves on the programs that they're using, and just having that investment has been huge for kids.
So now you can see why you all need to come to Chicago and go visit West Belden. So they're rocking it out. Thank you all for coming. We are really at the beginning, right, of the possibilities of what all this can be and what it can mean for advancing personalized learning and really democratizing education for all of our kids to have access to 21st century learning. And it's just so inspiring to work with these groups as well as the Gates Foundation support to help bring this bridge together. So thank you all for your attention, and we'll be around for questions if you have any more. Thanks.